Welcome back. Panel is here. CNBC editor-at-large John Harwood. Yamiche Alcindor, White House correspondent for the PBS NewsHour. NBC News chief White House correspondent Hallie Jackson. And Rich Lowry, editor of National Review. All right, I want to react here a little bit to Lindsey Graham. John Harwood, there was a bit of a theme in the various questions, whether it's the Mueller protection bill, up to Mitch McConnell, criminal justice reform bill, up to Mitch McConnell. But you saw the passion of Lindsey Graham. He's ready to fight on one and not fight as much on the other.
I was fascinated by his vehemence on that criminal justice reform bill. And I do think that Mitch McConnell reflects some residual resistance within the Republican base. But I think if we look at the results of the midterm elections, we can see the country moving toward the spirit of criminal justice reform. In Florida, when Ron DeSantis was elected governor and it appears that Rick Scott was elected senator, more than 60% of Floridians voted to restore voting rights for felons. 1.5 million people. That's to the detriment of the Republican Party on net. Yet Republican and Democratic voters came together to do it. I think whether or not this criminal justice reform bill happens in this lame duck or at some point down the road, we are headed in that direction.
Hallie, he wants the president to pick up the phone, call Mitch McConnell, tell him to do this. Sounds like he thinks the White House isn't pushing hard enough. Well,
but there are people inside the White House who are trying to push this, notably Jared Kushner, of course, who's been the big driver when it comes to this bill that we're talking about here. Mitch McConnell, remember, told Kushner, according to a White House official, in September-ish, don't do this before the midterms. If you hold off, making the commitment, I'll give you a floor vote. I'll give you a whip count, not a floor vote, but at least a whip count. And if you can get there, we'll do it after the midterms. Will Mitch McConnell keep his word to Jared Kushner? It's an interesting one.
Rich.
Notably, on the other side of the ledger, he was markedly cool about his own proposal to protect Mueller, which I think reflects that it has zero chance of getting Republican support in the Senate. Two, it is probably unconstitutional. I don't know how you can really constrain the president from firing an executive official of this nature. And if you want an investigation that the president, in theory, can't influence or shutter, you have to do it out of Congress, which is obviously that's going to happen in the House.
If I could bring it back to criminal justice quickly, I was at the Capitol all week talking to lawmakers about this criminal justice bill and make it very clear this is a criminal justice bill that could be the most significant criminal justice reform of a generation. People at the National Action Network, who is the party, who is the organization of Al Sharpton, there were a lot of lawmakers there that were very, very weary of this. They wanted a lot more sentencing reforms than the House bill passed. Come back to Friday, I had a very long conversation with Cory Booker, and he said, I'm going to be behind this bill. I don't care about the politics. He doesn't care about the fact that this might look like a win for President Trump. And it's because people think that families who were sentenced and who had these issues in the 90s and 80s deserve to be able to have some of these sentences on crack cocaine and cocaine and powder cocaine redone.
Right. It sounds like that Lindsey Graham is saying the same thing, saying, hey, Democrats aren't standing in the way here. It's Republicans. I want to go to the idea of the Democrats using the budget, John, to force a Mueller vote here. Is that worth the capital that they would be spending?
Doubt it. I don't think that Democrats, right after an election in which they've won control of the House of Representatives, want to make a shutdown their first priority. By the same token, I don't think we're going to have a shutdown because they don't fund the wall. I think these threats are made kind of casually these days. I think both parties have learned that it's a losing game, and I would not expect to have a government.
You are way too optimistic. But I think it's funny. I mean, December 7th for the spending bill deadline. Why do I have a feeling we're at least going to stretch this to close to the Christmas Eve witching hour?
Because you've been around the block before, Chuck, right? This ain't your first rodeo. I will say this. I think there's going to be some movement this coming week. I spoke with a source familiar with the matter, actually overnight, who tells me that the president's legal team expects to submit the answers to Robert Mueller's written questions before Thanksgiving. So we're looking at probably Tuesday or Wednesday that we will all learn that the president has submitted that. I'm curious to see what the sort of framing of that is going to be, if the president's team will say, and now we're done, because there's a couple of critical pieces of context. Those questions did not relate to obstruction of justice because the president's legal team refused to engage on that with Robert Mueller, despite that being obviously a key piece of the investigation. Additionally, they're written questions, which means the president's team can figure out what they want to do. The president told reporters on the South Lawn, as far as what happens next, we haven't even talked about whether or not to sit down with Robert Mueller. That's just not true. We know for months, based on our reporting, that the president has had these conversations. His legal team doesn't want him to. And now the president is saying this morning, this is probably it. there will probably be no more questions written or in person at all, no questions at all on obstruction, and nothing else as far as his view on the special counsel. Huge caveat. This is a president who can change his mind and might.
But
Hallie, I'm flattered that you think it's my first rodeo.
No, that's not what I meant. Oh, man. Now I'm in real trouble.
But Rich, we only know the president's version of all of this. We don't know why he did the written answers. Did he do it under threat of subpoena? Did he do it because he knows a subpoena is coming? It's not coming. Mueller hasn't spoken.
Yeah.
That's a big reminder here.
Well, there's clearly been some back and forth over the questions, which you would expect of any special counsel and any president. But I think the most under-discussed story is up to this point, despite Trump pounding on Mueller constantly, the White House has cooperated with this probe. And I think it's really impossible to shutter the probe at this point, because if you fire Mueller, he will show up in January as Jerry Nadler's first witness before the Judiciary Committee and tell everything he knows. So it's too late.
Then why do this Whitaker dance at the end of the day? Why do that? Because it now seems more head-scratching all the time.
It was, I think, primarily an act of vengeance against Jeff Sessions, who he never forgave for the recusal.
And I also don't get the sense that Matt Whitaker is going to end up being the person who is named permanently, based on what we know from our reporting.
Lindsey Graham seemed
pretty psyched about it. But Pam Bondi is somebody whose name comes up again and again in these conversations, as well as John Ratcliffe, by the way, who is emerging as another potential pick.
I think it comes back to the fact that the president could not stand one more day with Jeff Sessions. I mean, the reporting is that Jeff Sessions offered to resign multiple times. The reporting is that the president has berated him in front of other cabinet members. And of course, we've all seen him on Twitter say, this guy is getting on my nerves. I need him to go.
But the president over time has increasingly yielded to his visceral impulses. And I think Matt Whitaker reflects that.
All right, I got to ask quickly, MBS. Do you think the United States government, under President Trump, will sanction MBS?
No.
Echo. So how does this get resolved? That is, Lindsey Graham not going to carry water for Saudi Arabia. That was crystal clear. As he, I love the abrupt answer he gave me about MBS's brother.
Right. Said I would never work with him again.
So then what? Where does this go?
Well, the question is, that's exactly the question, Chuck, because the thing is, our reporting is that a source familiar with the matter tells us that the CIA has made the determination, right? That MBS is behind it, of course. And so the president is doing this dance. He's got his son-in-law, who is obviously close with MBS.
Mike Pompeo put out that statement yesterday that basically contradicted his former deputy.
But knocking down kind of a straw man by saying the conclusion is not final. Well, of course, right? But so this administration has had a history in the past of when controversial things come up, they sort of back burner it. And I wonder if that is something that may end up happening here.
That's what it feels. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.